The biggest question I ask myself every league is, what build am I going to league start? The answer always winds up being Toxic Rain every league, but there are times when I convince myself that it could be something else, and those are very fun moments. I love thinking about the range of possibilities that could be in the brief period before they're all annihilated by the cleansing wave of Toxic Rain spore pods. Now, since we're in the last month of a pretty dead league, I thought I would mix things up a bit and test out a bunch of the most popular league starters. My plan is to see how they all handle throughout the campaign and just the initial bit of mapping. We're not talking like taking it all the way to T16s necessarily, just kind of getting a good first half of day one feel for each build. I think that's a fun way to spend the next couple of weeks as hype for the next league gets rolling, and then once we're a little closer to that point, I could maybe even do a roundup of all the builds I played, compare and contrast. Maybe I'll even make one of those top 10 best league start builds, number 8 will amaze you videos that I've heard do so well. Now, this isn't going to be my usual full-fledged build guide. I mean, just look at the video length, it's under an hour. Instead, I'm mostly going to just kind of share thoughts and experiences of playing Boneshatter Jug through the campaign, initial bit of mapping, what I liked, what I don't like, and whether or not I think it's fun on a scale of, I don't know, fun to not fun. I will throw in a very basic POB if you want to play along, kind of follow along with what I did, but it won't be incredibly detailed or anything like that, like I've done in the past with the Toxic Rain League Start build. So that's it, intro's over, let's enter the Bone Zone. But first, don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you find it helpful or you want to see more like this. Alright, let's first off just start with some rapid fire pros and cons, and I'll lead with the pros, there are a lot more of them. Boneshatter Jug is simple, it's super tanky, it's very smooth throughout the campaign, it has an easy playstyle, basically just right-click everything to death, easy gearing, you move quickly, you use Leap Slam as your primary movement skill, so shield charge haters of the world unite on that one, and you get tons of quality of life thanks to being a Jug. It has fantastic clear, probably the best in the game, certainly some of the best in the game, and it can transition into other in-game builds such as Shrink Stackers that can break the in-game in half like a toothpick, but you don't have to do that either. Boneshatter Jug is a really strong build, you can just roll with that all the way. And now for the cons. The single target damage late into the endgame is pretty mediocre. And it is a melee build. And that's pretty much it for the downsides. So as for the build, what makes it work? Let's just start with Boneshatter. What is it? It's a melee skill. Technically, it's the melee skill. Melee gets a lot of hate in this game, and make no mistake, having to be close enough to reach out and touch an enemy in order to damage them is a disadvantage. And yet, melee has a lot of advantages that players tend to forget. It's tanky, it is simple, and it is consistent. Having a ton of armor makes it so that you are just naturally very tanky without really having to think about anything. And by playing melee and actually having to learn what boss mechanics do, you do get better at the game. Playing ranged builds is a handicap. Trust me, I'm Mr. Toxic Rain. I may have 40,000 hours of melee in World of Warcraft, but I only just started playing melee again in Path of Exile, and it immediately made me realize how much that playing ranged only builds had made me worse at the game. So even if you don't like playing melee just generally on principle, I can understand that, you probably should still play it from time to time, just so that the part of your brain that knows how to do boss mechanics doesn't completely shrivel up and die. Totems are commonly cited as the #1 reason that people don't play melee, and it is annoying that they are so vital for melee, but non-melee builds have no equivalent. That is pretty lame. But with that being said, you really only use totems when you're fighting map bosses, in-game bosses, and very occasional super juicy rare mobs. So I think people overestimate just how bad they really are. Not that they aren't annoying. They are annoying, but it's not some massive glaring problem that a lot of people make it out to be. Now let's talk about Boneshatter itself. It's a strike. That means it's a glorified basic attack, and it is glorified. It hits hard. It deals physical damage to you as well, and it grants a stacking buff called Trauma, and Trauma increases both the damage you deal with Boneshatter and that you take from Boneshatter. Now, because of this, you have to offset a lot of self-inflicted damage, and the best way to do that is with a ton of armor, but that's really not enough. You will eventually ramp up to the point where you need something else, and untiring from the Juggernaut Ascendancy is probably the best something else available for dealing with that. It kind of works like a better version of recoup. It's based on the damage you mitigate, and the only real cap on it because of that is your max hit. So on the positive side, you're able to take advantage of a lot of effects that are based on you being hit due to constantly hitting yourself with every attack. This is only part of why Boneshatter is so special though. When it stuns an enemy, which it does basically all the time because it hits so hard, it causes them to pulse that same damage out to other nearby enemies, and the pulse AoE size is based on the stun duration. Because this skill has built-in AoE, you can just focus on jacking up your single target damage and your defenses. And this is why Boneshatter is so great. It is super easy to play, it is super easy to gear. Because of this, it's very popular in solo self-found, hardcore trade, and obviously hardcore solo self-found. All you really need is some good defensive gear and an axe, and you are ready to kill dudes. Boneshatter has a lot of built-in damage as well, and so you're not even reliant on maintaining an excellent weapon throughout the campaign and the early endgame. Case in point, I killed Act 10 Kitava wearing an axe I found in Act 7. Prior to finding that axe, I was still using an axe I had found in Act 3. I was chopping bosses down like I wanted to win first place in a lumberjack competition. I easily cleared yellow maps and garbage campaign gear at level 69. I then went into like tier 11 maps and even a tier 16 white map, but still at level 70. Unfortunately, I leveled up and I was totally having no problem clearing through the map. The only thing that killed me was like I stopped to loot something. I got killed by some on death effects. And then I tried to face tank a tier 16 map boss, Hillock, the Dunes boss. I was just like, can I face tank this? And the answer was no. This was probably the smoothest, easiest campaign playthrough that I can remember having on any build, even including Toxic Rain. I was very, very taken by just how good Boneshatter was throughout all of the early progression, day one stuff. Now, as I said, one of the biggest advantages that Boneshatter has is that you can basically make it work with any gear, total SOSF freedom, you're good to go, but there is one really good standout unique that a lot of people will pursue on day one of a league, and that is this pair of gloves here, Tanu Ahi. The way they work, as you can see from them, is they give attack speed, armor and evasion, and physical attack leeched as life. And then, more importantly, they give these two effects here, a 10% chance to gain adrenaline for 2 seconds, and a 10% chance to gain onslaught for 4 seconds. And both of those have a chance to occur when you leech all the way up to full health, and then it's removed by filling your unreserved life. So you can actually make that proc super easily by just using like Blood Rage or some sort of very small degen, and then every time you hit and leech, you're gonna fill back up. You're also kind of getting some degen just simply by having Boneshatter removing some of your health with every hit. You're gonna be filling that back up. So you basically have not permanent adrenaline and onslaught, but very high uptime on adrenaline and onslaught, and those are both very powerful buffs. And then you also get a bunch of damage leeches life and some good stats otherwise. Now, the only reason I thought it was really worth mentioning these gloves is that they are also an anagram for Ahi Tuna. Not a clever anagram, obviously. As you can see, Tanu is an anagram for tuna, and Ahi is just Ahi. But there it is. This is the only unique that I feel like would be like a real high priority to get as a Boneshatter Jug. Not that you need them, you can absolutely make this build work with no uniques at all, but you have a lot of freedom. You could throw tons of other uniques in there as well. It's really just a very open-ended build in terms of what gear you throw at it. Now, I have cooked up a very basic path of building here. I've just thrown together, this is kind of what I pursued at a lot of the sort of major level breakpoints, 12, 22, 33, 46, 54, 60, end of campaign. And I could just kind of very briefly scrub through these, but the idea here is basically just coming right down and taking the two-hand mastery, because you're going to be using a two-handed weapon from the very start of the game all the way through, and then coming over here and taking Lust for Carnage, giving yourself some leech, and that's kind of what I want to do in Act 1. Then in Act 2, get Warrior's Blood, get the Axe Mastery, get that Rage from the Axe Mastery. This has a couple of advantages. The Rage on hit will give you a bit of move speed, a bit of attack speed, and since you are using Leap Slam to move, that can be helpful for just progressing through the zones, but then also it's good for doing sustained damage and single target, and this is a good wheel just in general. You're very tanky as a Marauder in the early leveling experience, and you kind of are more lacking for damage. So it's nice to have kinetic impacts. You don't necessarily need to take this Leech Mastery wheel. I just like it because it does have offensive value, attack speed across the board, and then a lot of leech. You're going to be doing predominantly physical damage, so it is good to have that sort of self-sustain, not really have to rely entirely on your life flask. Then you can come up here, get versatility, make sure that you're actually like hitting with all of your attacks. That accuracy rating really helps. And then as you progress to level 33, you kind of have your first choice on the Ascendancy. I'll cover that a bit more in some detail later. You basically have a choice to make, but you're trying to come down here and get the Attack Mastery Tribal Fury and the Attack Mastery that makes your strike skills hit an additional target, because around level 28 is when you're first able to switch over to Boneshatter. You probably want to wait until you have this Attack Mastery. Maybe you've even ascended once before you do it, so that would be like low 30s, but you know, you can technically start with Boneshatter from level 28. One thing that is important with Boneshatter is that you do need to have an Orb of Chance to buy it from the vendor, Clarissa in Act 3. You're actually not able to like get that as a quest reward. You do have to, I think you have to kill General Gravicius, if I remember correctly, and then come over to Clarissa here in the Sarn encampment and buy it from her. I believe that is the name of the quest. I don't remember the name of the quest, but that is the requirement for the quest, is actually killing Gravicius and then buying it with an Orb of Chance. So in my experience of doing this, I could not get an Orb of Chance to drop. Like, I just couldn't. And I had a Boneshatter of Complex Trauma that I kind of wanted to play with in my league setup. So normally what I will do is I will start out as a solo self-found character. You know, I'll just like make a solo self-found character. Usually it's better to do that as like a standard league, so you're not interacting with any league mechanic. If you're doing like league start practice, you'll make a solo self-found character, and then you'll play through it that way, and then that way you're not kind of having your experience tainted by having a character, you know, that like has access to a bunch of currency and has all of the ascendancies already done, all of the ascendancy trials already done. You know, you're trying to get that like day one league start feel. However, I did want to play around with that Boneshatter of Complex Trauma, so I ultimately did wind up migrating over at that point. I didn't take anything from my like, you know, whatever, my account, other than that, like just the Boneshatter of Complex Trauma and one Orb of Chance to buy Boneshatter, because I think I spent like 20-25 minutes just dicking around in Act 3 to no avail, trying to find an Orb of Chance. So that is maybe the one thing that could kind of hold you up. Then after that, your goal basically is to like just kind of fill out some nodes around here, especially since you're using Boneshatter and you're hitting yourself a lot. You're going to want to go get inexorable pretty much as quickly as you can, so you'll have a bunch of endurance charges and a bunch more armor while you're attacking. You can also pick up Hatchet Master, get yourself some more damage, and then the immediate goal, the next goal really is, especially once you've picked up this node here, Undeniable, in your Ascendancy, you're going to want to try to come over pretty much as quickly as possible and pick up Life and Mana Leech, so you no longer have to use a Mana Flask, and then Precise Technique, because your accuracy rating is always going to be higher than your max life as any sort of attack-based Juggernaut, and that means 40% more attack damage just kind of for free. There's nothing really to balance. You know, as we can see, like, I mean, I'm currently, like, this character has, like, all my level 69 gear or whatever on, but my life is, like, under 3k and my accuracy is close to 4, so very easy to balance all of that out. Then after that, as we just kind of progress toward the end of the campaign, just kind of picking up some more life nodes, picking up Iron Reflexes. This makes it so you can wear a bunch of armor evasion gear and just get all armor value out of that. It actually has the added benefit of anything that grants increased evasion rating and then like is affecting evasion rating, that will be increased, and then it'll be like double dipped on by anything that increases armor as well. So Iron Reflexes is very good, and you can kind of like really double your benefits basically by running both a Jade and a Granite Flask and just giving yourself like a huge amount of armor. Like this character's gear is terrible. I'm literally just wearing the gear I finished the campaign with. I didn't really do anything like gear-wise, and I'm sitting at like 20,000 armor just standing still, and then if I pop flasks, over 40k armor. That's pretty sick, considering that this character's gear is like busted. And then finally here I have just a very basic like recommended tree, kind of what I would be shooting for like level 90, 92 range, just kind of picking up a lot of more embellishment stuff. The main thing would be picking up like Mana Mastery so that I can fit auras in a bit better, kind of make the build work a bit better. All right, now I'm going to talk about like the skills that I used while leveling. So I just have very basic skill setups for like 2 through 11. You have a couple of options that are given to you by Nessa after you kill Hillock. Obviously, level 1, you have to use Heavy Strike to kill Hillock. Fine, it sucks, but it's just one boss. For level 2 through 11, I think Spectral Throw really is the best weapon. or best skill available. Like, I don't really think there's anything that's competitive that's available to Marauder that's going to be operating on that level. You can play around with some other stuff, Ground Slam if you want, but I just think it's all worse than Spectral Throw. You do have to buy Spectral Throw from Nessa, but it only costs 1 Wisdom Scroll, so you can afford it. From level 12, you get Sunder. I'm a huge fan of Sunder. You can absolutely rock with Sunder like all the way through the campaign. I mean, you just play Sunder, but Boneshatter does overtake it kind of like pretty much once it's available. So you rock with Sunder and you just kind of roll with that up into the like high 20s, like 28 plus, and then whenever you're able to buy Boneshatter and switch over to that, you go with that. Now you have a little bit of freedom in terms of like support gems. Chance to Bleed is pretty good in the early levels, not because it is particularly good, it just adds a little bit of physical damage, and those bleeds, those very basic bleeds in the first couple acts are actually worth like a lot of damage. And then Ruthless is very good if you're using Sunder, any sort of melee skill. Beware though, if you're using Spectral Throw, Ruthless only affects melee, so it's literally not going to do anything for Spectral Throw. Volley's pretty good, it adds a little bit more damage, or has less of a damage penalty than lesser multiple projectiles, so I prefer it. The Light Path is kind of better for Spectral Throw as well. And then, you know, that's pretty much it. You basically are just right-clicking your way all the way up to Boneshatter, where you then continue right-clicking your way all the way through the campaign. Most of the rest of these skills, you know, you've got your totems, you've got Precision. You can hook this up to Arrogance. I wouldn't do this until after the campaign, basically until you've picked up the Mana Mastery to get, like, more mana reservation of skills. You pick up Champion of the Cause in this little node here, the Mana Mastery, and then you're able to kind of move your auras around a bit. And at that point, I would reserve some life by using Precision with Arrogance. This gives you the added benefit of Precision being like more powerful, since Arrogance support increases the aura effect by quite a bit. And then War Banner, you're going to get this during Act 1. You're going to want to pick this up and start using it and just never drop it at any point. You can pick up Vulnerability and use that as a curse in Act 3 if you want. Not a huge deal. You may not have the gem sockets to fit it in. I didn't. You can hook this up to Life Tap, again, just kind of as like, you know, not something you have to do, something you can do as kind of a campaign or post-campaign optimization, just to make it so that if you don't have enough mana to cast Vulnerability, you can use Life Tap, and now you're using your health pool, and then that makes it a lot easier. As for mobility skills, I like Frost Blink. It's definitely my favorite. The only real downside to it, you get it very early on, I think level 8 or so in the campaign. Very easy to, like, you know, just point and click interface. It gives you a lot of movement. The only real downside to it is that you will need some int, so you're probably going to want to buy like an amulet from Nessa that has int on it. That's pretty much all you need to be able to use Frostblink, though. You will have to buy Frostblink from her. It won't be available as a quest reward. Now, as for Ancestral Cry, this is something you can use with Boneshatter. There are some other war cries you can use in the earlier levels if you really want to go through that, like just to look at the cries that are available. You can use like Intimidating Cry. You can just use this from level 10 on, and then once you hit like level 28 or 30 or whenever you switch over to Boneshatter, you can switch over to Ancestral Cry, which is here it is. And so Ancestral Cry, the main thing that it does is it just kind of gives you the war cry equivalent of Ancestral Call support, but without the big downside that Ancestral Call support has of dealing a lot less damage with every hit. So this is just like all benefit. It also gives you more melee range, which is pretty nice. And then, you know, if you want to use Call to Arms support once you're over level 24 to just automate casting it so you never have to stop and actually manually cast it, that is something you can do. It's definitely something I prefer. Like, as you can see, I am, you know, I have the sound turned off for it, but as you can see, I am just crying all the time. I'm going to do it any second now, I'm sure. There we go. Other than that, you use Determination, and then I leveled Pride in my offhand. I didn't actually use it while leveling, and that's because of the mana reservation issue, but as soon as you're able to get Champion of the Cause, the reservation efficiency node, and the Mana Mastery node, I like to switch over to, or I would switch over to using Pride, and then that is when I would go to using Precision with the Arrogance support, and as you can see, I have enough mana to be able to use all of those skills together. Precision, War Banner, Determination, and Pride. Very standard setup for a Boneshatter Jug. And you'll be absolutely slamming everything. I didn't use Molten Shell or Molten Shell with automation during the campaign. Probably should have. It would have made me a little tankier. I died a couple of times during the campaign. All human error, all my fault. And Molten Shell would have definitely helped, but I just didn't have the sockets to be able to fit it in comfortably. And then you can use cast when damage taken if you want instead of automation. I just prefer automation. I like, exactly as it says, I like to have it be automated. Have the maximum possible uptime on Molten Shell. Okay, now I want to talk about the Ascendancy, because that is kind of the first little spot where you have a bit of a choice to make. So you're going to ascend around level like 33 or something, and I think for some people, I went and looked at like Max Roll's guide, which is written by Tripolar Bear, who's great. Like, if you wanted a written guide, I would recommend that one. They recommend Untiring. I think that could definitely work. It'll certainly make you safer and tankier while using Boneshatter to have Untiring available from the very start. The only downside with it is that Undeniable gives you a massive amount of accuracy and a massive amount of attack speed. So you're going to be hitting a lot faster, doing a lot more damage by having Undeniable, and not having that damage means you're going to do less damage. You're going to be clearing everything slower throughout the campaign. And you're also going to be moving slower, since a lot of your movement speed is tied to the speed at which you can leap slam. So if you're leap slamming much, much, much slower throughout the campaign, you're going to be moving through the campaign slower. So I prefer to do Undeniable first, and then you have the option at your second Ascendancy to either do, like at level 50 something, either do Untiring to get the defensive value then, or to do Unstoppable, which gives you move speed, immunity to stun, immunity to freeze. Your action and move speed can't be modified below base value, kind of makes you somewhat semi-immune to like all of the slowing, chilling effects. Not completely, but like good enough to always be functional and in control of your character. So I really prefer that. I did play around with taking Untiring initially, and I ultimately, because I had transitioned over, I did steal some regret orbs so that I could spec out of that and spec into Undeniable and Unstoppable prior to the third lab, and I definitely felt better about doing it that way. So, taking Untiring first is a very defensive, safe approach. You can do that, but I would just do Undeniable and Unstoppable, and then take Untiring as my third Ascendancy before the end of the campaign. And then, the plan to take Unbreakable as the final Ascendancy. Unbreakable, amazing. Really, 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 really good. As you can see, it gives you a huge amount of max hit on all of your elemental resistances, gives you a lot of extra armor, a lot of extra defensive value as well. And, even though Untiring looks like it doesn't really give much, just 40% increased life regen rate, that line in the red, the physical damage prevented from hits in the last 10 seconds is regen as life per second, is actually very, very, very substantial. Now, notably, you're not taking Unflinching. Unflinching seems like it would be really good. You get a chance to get endurance charges when you're hit. You get endurance charges if you've been hit recently. You just get so many endurance charges out of it, and you get one max endurance charge, which is pretty good. The thing is, you're kind of already getting that by having an Exorable. Like, you're getting endurance charge uptime out of an Exorable. You're good. So having Unflinching is like very much overkill on the you're already at max endurance charges basically all the time, and so this really just winds up being like one max endurance charge. It basically is just vigor, and I actually think it's not like remotely competitive with the other options. I did look around at like pobs of people playing Bone Zone Jug in like day 1, day 2 of the league, and I do see like a small number of people taking Unflinching. And to me, that just feels like a mistake, or like they're going for a very different version of the build, one where they are like an endurance charge stacker, in which case that would be very, very different of a build from what we're doing here, kind of the standard Bone Zone build. Okay, I said I would rate Boneshatter on a scale of fun to not fun, and it absolutely gets a fun. I do recommend this build, highly. I don't want to get too excited on the very first build of the series, but Bone Zone owns. It's popular because it's good, but it's also popular because it is extremely fun. I could absolutely see League starting this in patch 3.25. There are plenty of other builds to play around with in the meantime, definitely more to see, but I could just go with this and be super happy, no doubt in my mind. I'm going to continue doing videos like this in the run-up to the next League. Steel Champ is up next, but after that I'm kind of willing to go whatever way people want. So feel free to make some suggestions. My focus is on popular builds, so try and keep the suggestions normal. Don't ask for Tornado Shot Occultist or Eye of Winter Mine Inquisitor. No well-rounded beasts for me this league. I'm round enough. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.